deep to my soul now. Oh, Bob is back in town. You can run.
Crossroad Blues, Robert Johnson, here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, before we go on to our next story, I want to make a correction on my math over that last segment. That was about 8,000 every 10 years in the number of wells being drilled in the Gulf. It comes out to about 3 wells a day, not 25.
Still a remarkable number in the Gulf of Mexico.
An enormous number for that long a period of time.
Well, let's continue on the issue of oil.
Well, we turn now to a look at a story about the oil giant BP that has received nearly no national attention. Just over 3 months ago, thousands of pounds of toxic chemicals began spewing into the skies from BP's massive oil refinery in Texas City. The release began on April 6th, 2 weeks before the explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig. But it took BP weeks to even realize there was a problem. BP now estimates 538,000 pounds of chemicals escaped from the refinery over a 40-day period.
The journalist Ryan Knutson of ProPublica and Frontline recently traveled to Texas City to investigate what happened. He joins us here in New York. His reporting on the story appears on the website ProPublica.org. Welcome, Ryan. Tell us what you found.
Thanks. Well, we sort of went at this with the question of, well, you know, in 2005, BP had a disaster at this Texas City refinery where 15 people were killed. And after that event, you know, BP said it was a transformational event. They would make a lot of changes to the or to their company. The Deepwater Horizon happened. So we wanted to examine, well, what was the lead up to that explosion and what has been the outcome of the promises to improve the company. And it didn't take long to start finding that there have still been a lot of issues at the Texas City refinery, and most notably, what I thought was interesting was this was a story that was actually in the Daily News of Galveston County that on June 5th that hadn't received any attention elsewhere, that there had been this 538,000-pound release. And what happened in that circumstance was there's something called an ultra cracker at this refinery, and it's an important step in the process to produce gasoline. And there's a hydrogen compressor on this ultra cracker, and it broke down. And what it does is it captures a lot of the pollution that's emitted from this, and it disposes of it safely. Now, when that broke down, BP had a choice. Do we shut down the ultra cracker and lose an important part of producing gasoline that we'd have to buy elsewhere, or maybe reformulate the gasoline? Or do we send everything to a flare and burn it off into the atmosphere? Now, flares, at best case, can destroy 98% of the chemicals that are sent to it, so 2% they know is going to release. At best case, there's also studies that show that as much as 20% of what is sent to a flare doesn't get destroyed and is sent off into the atmosphere. So they decided to send it to a flare, and it took them 40 days to make the repairs. And once they were finished, by the time that they had finished analyzing all the data they had collected during the emissions event, they determined that 538,000 pounds of chemicals released into the atmosphere, most notably 17,000 pounds of benzene. Now, in the state of Texas, if you emit more than 10 pounds in a 24-hour period, you're supposed to report that as an emissions event. In this case, 425 pounds of benzene were being released every 24 hours for 40 days, ultimately leading up to 17,000 pounds.
And this is already a plant that has one of the highest benzene release rates in the country, isn't it?
Right. The Sierra Club did a study that from looking at reportable emissions events from 1997 to 2007 and found that the Texas City refinery was the #1 releaser of benzene in the United States. BP says that it has reduced its benzene emissions there by, I believe, 23% over each year, or 50% from last year. So the numbers have gone down significantly since that 2007 study was completed. But as you know, environmental advocates make the case, so there's already a lot of benzene coming from that refinery. There's a lot of benzene because in that Texas City community because there's a couple other refineries there. So it's
And how is it possible for this release to go on for so long? You would assume that if they know that they were trying to burn some of these gases off with a flare, that they would have a likelihood of a potential for extra releases that they'd be monitoring on a daily basis.
Right, and that's the thing that I had a hard time pinning down from the BP people I spoke with, because I know that, I mean, what they said originally is that they've got a method that's approved by Texas regulators to monitor this along the way, and what I know that they have fence line monitors that are about 6 feet high, and so if it reaches any sort of threshold, then it pages officials at the refinery, and they make a decision. And so apparently, the fence line monitors didn't go off. Now the flare is 300 feet tall, so clearly this is going to kind of go out and sort of spread around. And so there's various science about what the concentration is once it reaches the ground. It depends on the wind and things like that.
What does benzene do?
Well, benzene is a known carcinogen, so it doesn't necessarily have immediate, I don't know. I mean, imagine if you were in a room full of it, you'd start coughing and wheezing and that sort of thing, but it's proven that it will increase your cause or your likelihood of getting cancer.
Especially leukemia, right?
Yeah.
Last year, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, fined the company, BP, $87 million for failing to address safety problems from 2005 when they killed 15 people.
Yeah, and so in 2005 they settled with OSHA for $21 million, and they agreed to a number of improvements at the plant. And one of the main things that they agreed to is they were going to hire an independent auditor to come in and do an examination of the plant, point out things that need to be improved. OSHA says that BP should have made all those improvements by the end of 2009. BP says that it was under the impression that they just needed to have the auditor point these things out by September 2009, and that they could make these improvements as they made maintenance upgrades along the way.